it's Brad again, and what a ride we've been on the last couple of months on our Manifest Online gathering journey. We've been talking about God's original epic story beginning in the pages of Genesis, where his mission was to create this planet where he put Eden everywhere, right? The kingdom of God here on earth, which was derailed by three specific rebellions in the book of Genesis, which are in the Garden of Eden and the flood and the Tower of Babel. We saw how Jesus, centuries and eons later, came to reverse the effects of these rebellions through his life, through his death, his resurrection, ascension, and sending of the Holy Spirit to create a brand new community as well. So the last couple of weeks we've been talking about that us, that we. What does that look like? What shouldn't it look like? And where do we find ourselves in this moment of history where everything's being turned upside down? So what I'm going to do this week, instead of doing a formal sermon, I'm going to bring you into a conversation over Zoom that I had with a friend of mine named Chris Synesael. He's a pastor of West Village Church and founding pastor in Victoria, BC. Is my dog in here? I think my dog's in here. Anyways, had a great conversation with Chris about community during the pandemic. I wanted to reach out to him because he's a great guy. I've known him for years. But he said something online. I thought, ooh, that was really good. I want to dig into that a little bit. So I loved my conversation with Chris as we understand what does it mean to do this together? How do we be kingdom outposts where we are? All of that. I know you're going to love it too because he's such a great guy. Recording.
Awesome.
Hey everybody, it's good to touch base with you today. Today I've got a friend of mine named Chris Synesael. When he first introduced himself, I was mispronouncing. I was trying to pronounce based on how I was reading it, Chris. And then I remember him saying like Tylenol.
Yeah.
I remember saying that. Tylenol, Synesael.
Yeah,
so there we go. We've known each other for a number of years. Chris is the pastor and also the planter of West Village Church. And where is that located exactly in BC?
We're in beautiful Victoria.
Oh, yeah. Beautiful Victoria.
Sunny out today, no snow. It's wonderful.
Dude.
I don't even. Hey, my kid just, my oldest boy just got recruited to play basketball at Briarcrest, Cairnport, Saskatchewan, just outside of Moose Jaw. So he'll be going there in the fall. And we realized you don't own a winter coat. We got to get you a winter coat. So
yeah, no kidding. Wow.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
Rough living here, I tell you.
Yeah. Hey, I was just thinking because I don't think anybody probably in my circle, like in the Manifest world, kind of knows who you are. Could you just tell us a little bit about the church you planted and kind of how that's going?
Yeah, so married to Kelly, 20 years. We have 4 kids. Oldest is Tyler, 17, Jacob, 16, Emily, 13, and Lucas, our youngest, who's adopted, turns 12 in a couple of weeks. And actually, this coming Sunday, so I don't know what the date is, like February, 7th or 8th or something like that, will be our 10-year anniversary. So 10 years ago,
wow.
This coming Sunday, we started West Village in our living room with a small group of people. And like every church plant, just longing to see people meet Jesus, longing to reach our city, church for people that don't go to church, that whole thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, God's been super gracious to us. It's been a fantastic ride. We're not like a massive church or anything like that, but we have grown. We've seen lots of people meet Jesus. I would say if I could use a word to describe our church, it's a bit of a buzzword, but I'd say we're very missional in the sense that we organize primarily not around like a Sunday gathering or a Sunday service, but around like these little house churches that meet across our city that are very diverse and unique. We have 13 of those. We're getting ready to start a couple more in the next few months.
Sweet.
And yeah, they are the hubs of ministry. They are the hubs of disciple making, mission. Converts get baptized there. Shepherding takes place there. Discipleship and just kind of growth in the gospel and studying of the scriptures and all those things, that all happens at that level.
Gotcha.
And then on Sunday, when we were able to, we bring those house churches together, and those, we call them community groups, but those house churches would come together for like corporate worship and teaching and vision casting and all that. So that's kind of what our church looks like. And yeah, it's been an exciting ride. Love it. Love every minute of it. And our hope is in the next year to start another church. We just brought
awesome.
a church planning apprentice on about 5 weeks ago. And we're hoping to start another community out in kind of a bedroom community just outside of Victoria called Souk. So,
Okay.
yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
The reason for this conversation, you already kind of dipped into it, but which is a post you made on Facebook. You're in trouble.
Yeah.
So, no, I actually thought it was awesome. But we actually met right on a trip to Thailand organized by C2C Network.
Yeah.
Kind of like an immersion in their church planting world and that life. I just want to give you. Do you remember? I have to ask you. I remember what my nickname was. Do you remember my nickname?
I do not remember your nickname, but I remember that I have never seen, and I'm sure that this is connected to your nickname.
Yes.
I have never seen a human being's feet swell up as large as you had cankles. That was your nickname, wasn't it? Yeah. I was going to say you had cankles. It was like, it just went from like knee to foot. It was like a knee with a foot with little toes, these little digits like coming off of it. It was crazy.
Well, it is nuts. I want to see. That's not working now. I'm trying to share the screen.
Okay.
Because it's not working because I actually have a picture of it. I'm going to put this up later. But did you remember what was it is gross. It was like I had rolls on my ankle. It was, bizarre. Do you remember what yours was? I was trying.
I don't remember, but it should have been something like, J-Lo or something, because I was all about the car karaoke.
I remember that. That was.
We had that 15 passenger van that had like the karaoke machine in it, and I just wanted to sing Bohemian Rhapsody over and over and over. And you
and Johnny, I think you nailed it better than him. But
we had a moment.
That was when I realized that I don't think Chris feels awkward about anything. That was what I got from that. So that was really fun.
Yeah, that was pretty fun. That was a good trip. That was a great trip. Very, very, I would say to this day, I'm not kidding. God stirred something in my heart on that trip with regards to prayer that still has had a lasting impact in my life. Yeah.
Amen. Yeah. I remember near the end, we had the opportunity to wash the feet of some church planters.
The Camus.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. And they were, the scarring on those feet was just unbelievable. And I remember thinking what a privilege it was to even be able to wash their feet.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah, just absolutely.
Unbelievable.
That was a pretty powerful moment.
And chills just thinking about it. Hey, this has been a challenging season. You kind of alluded to it a little bit already for every church, I think everywhere. I think everywhere in the world, but here in North America, as we've been so dependent on our gatherings, you said our central gatherings, that wasn't the big deal for West Village. However, what has this year been like for you guys? What are some of the challenges you guys have faced throughout this pandemic?
Yeah, I think like everybody when it first hit, I went through some real deep personal stuff in the midst of all this. Like we lost Kelly's mom and my dad. Kelly's mom in January. My dad literally passed away suddenly of a heart attack the first or second Sunday that British Columbia was in lockdown. So there was a lot of different emotions mixed in there. But to just set that aside for a second, I think when it first happened, we all sort of thought, oh, we'll be back by Easter.
Right.
I don't know if you had those thoughts.
Which I was having those hopes, at least.
Utterly ridiculous at this point, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's been hard in the sense that there's been, like I describe it as like a death by 1,000 paper cuts.
Yeah.
It's been this like slow grinding experience. And so I think the challenge has been how do we maintain, not like, and this is an analogy we've been using. When you go to a hotel for the weekend, you typically don't unpack your suitcase because you're not staying very long. It doesn't make sense to unpack your suitcase. And if you're going to go for a longer amount of time, if you're going to be there for a week or 2 weeks or whatever, like you unpack, hang your clothes in the closet, you put your shoes away properly, all that stuff, instead of just living out of your suitcase. And I think there's been a sense in people that they've been trying to live out of the suitcase. And we really didn't want to do that as a church. We didn't want to stay in that place of like, we're just going to hold our breath until this all goes away. From the very beginning, I said, I think there's a moment here. I think God's doing something. And to quote Churchill, although he wasn't talking about church or Jesus, he said, you never want to waste a good crisis.
Right.
What does God have for us in this season? How do we, as leaders, as shepherds of our church, how do we help move our church into the place where we're actually willing to hear and receive what God might be doing in this season? And so not to just check out, but to actually press into some things that he might have. And I think we might be surprised to find that those are actually really beautiful things that, God has a way of redeeming, right? Like, I'm not going to come along and be the guy that says, I think the pandemic is a good thing. I don't think it is. I think it's a bad thing. But what we, see at the very center of God's story, right? We see the ugliness of the cross, but it's through the ugliness of the cross that God brings about this beautiful redemptive moment where he rescues and saves and redeems humanity. And I think that could be analogous to the season we're in. There's an ugliness of COVID-19, of the global pandemic, of all the things that are associated with it. But in the midst of the hard things, God can bring redemption. And so what are those redeeming things that he's doing in our lives and then in our churches? And so the hardness has been walking through the pandemic and the things associated with it.
Yeah.
But then there's been beauty woven into that as we are just looking to see what he's doing.
Oh, that's so good. I love the way you put that, and that's a really good analogy with the suitcase.
Yeah,
that's I'm
gonna unpack, folks. Unpack. Yeah, unpack. That's what we keep saying, everyone. Unpack. Settle in.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, in your post, you quoted a scripture, which Hebrews 10:25, and a little bit of surrounding that. That's kind of roughly phrased that do not forsake the meeting together or gathering together. Now, you and I have heard pastors use that in all kinds of different ways to justify different kinds of actions. First of all, before we get into your quote, I just want to ask you, first of all, what doesn't that verse mean, do you think? And then maybe what do you think it does mean?
Yeah. So what it doesn't mean is that the church is commanded to gather in a way that dishonors the government. I'm actually, I've already preached it because we're preached to a video camera now, but this Sunday preaching a sermon on the issue of when is it okay for the church to resist government. And what I would say is Hebrews 10 has been traipsed out as a verse to support churches that are going to disregard, our government in this moment. And it doesn't mean that. The apostle that wrote the letter of Hebrews to that particular church was not writing to a church community that was being prevented from gathering. And he was not instructing them, hey, you have a tyrannical government over you that's preventing you from gathering. You must gather to, to stick it to the government in effect. It was actually the opposite of that. They were allowed to gather. They were not being, forbidden from gathering. And yet they were choosing not to gather. And as a result of that decision to not gather, people were falling away from Jesus. They were falling into sin. And so the apostle who wrote that letter was functionally coming in and kind of, smacking the Christians upside the head, as, the epistles often do, and saying, like, what's wrong with you? Like, you have this opportunity to meet, to be reminded of God's goodness and grace, to be reminded of the gospel, to share your brokenness, to have someone tell you how good the love of Jesus is, to be prayed for, to be ministered to co-mission and co-labor together. And yet you're not taking this opportunity to do it. And the result of it is it's leading to death in your life. It's leading to brokenness in your life. It's leading to sin in your life. Please do not forsake gathering together.
Yeah.
So I actually think Hebrews 10 is a profound verse for the moment we find ourselves in.
Yeah.
But it's profound for different reasons than we might think. It's not profound because it tells us to disregard the government. It's profound because it's saying there are ways you can still be together, ways which we should probably keep in mind that there are Christians around the world who would literally give their life to be able to do what we're able to do, even what you and I are able to do right now.
Yeah.
And so why aren't you taking advantage of those? Why aren't you pursuing those? Why aren't you leaning into those? Why aren't you giving yourself over to those so that you can be built up in the gospel, so that you can, be reminded of the goodness and grace of Jesus, so that you can pray for one another, so that you can share God's goodness and grace, and then invite other people into that don't yet know about how good he is.
Preach.
That's what I would say. Yeah. Sorry. There's my sermon.
No, this is why I wanted to talk to you, my friend.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I knew it'd be good. So no, that's excellent. So I think that obviously I think part of what we're wrestling with and guiding our people through is really, I don't know if the word addiction is the right word or wrong word, but maybe a reliance on a particular form of gathering, and that we've kind of lumped gathering into that matrix. And so it feels like this doesn't count, right? Because we're not doing that. We're not doing that thing that we all know and have come to rely on, right? This structure, this form. So I totally agree.
Yeah, and I sympathize with those sentiments, right? Like, I mean, I think even if you just feel like, I think it's important to think theologically about these things. So we live an embodied experience, and we the Christian faith is like it's an embodied faith. Like, you think of Jesus, like he didn't zoom, right? He didn't zoom from heaven to earth. He actually came in the flesh. And when you really like kind of unpack and unthread the realities of the church and what it is and the imagery that is given to us, I mean, it's embodied. There's no way you can get away from that. And so while I think what we are able to experience now is not the fullness of what it is, it's kind of like a veiled version of what the church is meant to be. However, I would say, like what we've been asked at least by our provincial government, and what it sounds like from all provinces at this point, is like to temporarily suspend our rights for the sake of the love of neighbor, which, I mean, just sounds like Jesus to me. Like there's, and so I think like the Hebrews 10 idea is like, well, let's take advantage of every means necessary to hold the line when it comes to our faith, like to hold, like I mean, you just think about, like, you hear all kinds of people talking about the effects of the lockdown, right? Like the mental health, suicides are up, opioid crisis, economic realities. Like there are like probably more now than ever opportunities for the church to be the church, and for the church to experience the beauty of what it means to be a part of a church, but then to also allow others to experience that. So I'll just give you one example of that. I'm a basketball guy, right? Like I play basketball. Been playing basketball with the same group of guys for a number of years. One of these guys posted on, like, our basketball stuff's been shut down, so we haven't been able to see these guys as much. And this one guy who I've had a relationship with for a long time, and I play basketball not just because I like basketball, but also because I want to play basketball as a missionary. And I actually haven't seen a ton of really great fruit on the basketball court. Some, but not a ton. Maybe that's because I get really mad and think when I don't win. I don't know how I play. That's definitely a possibility. But regardless, one of the guys I play basketball with, he's probably about 10 years younger than me. He posted on social media, it was a photo of him at the top of a mountain. We got tons of like great hiking spots here. And it was this long post about how he'd really been struggling with the the lockdown for the better part of a year. Had really battled mental health, had been through some hard things, started drinking, and he'd kind of given that all up, and was like, this was like a new beginning for him. So I just reached out to him. I was like, hey, bro, like, I love to hike, which I do. I love to hike. I'm like, we should go hiking sometime. Well, I was like, on a Thursday, that Saturday, him and I are hiking. And we're hiking, and we're just talking. And he was talking about like isolation, loneliness, like all the things that you would associate with the pains of lockdown. And I was able to come alongside him and just talk about my church, talk about my missional community, talk about like these group of people that, like, I'm like, yeah, like it's not awesome being on Zoom, but there's something about knowing there's a group of people out there that love me, care about me. We're chatting on WhatsApp all the time. We Zoom multiple times a week. So it's not just like a once a week drop-in Bible study. We have fun together. We do games nights. We've done some prayer walks because we're allowed to do that with our health orders. Like to actually feel like you're walking through the brokenness of this moment together, where I can get on there and go like, oh my gosh, this was a hard week. Can you pray for me?
Yeah, like I just did that last night. That was me.
Totally. And so to be able to share that with my buddy, and even invite him into that, and to say like, I want to be that for you. Like that's what I told him. Like, I want to do that for you. So like we've been hiking every other Saturday for probably, the weather's held pretty good here, but for like the last 3 months, we've been going hiking. We're texting regularly, to the degree where this guy was like, hey, can you send me some podcasts? So I sent him a bunch of, bro podcasts like Joe Rogan stuff. And then I sent him this one. I'm like, hey, this one's me. Like, it was our church podcast. Little smiley face. And he wrote me back probably about 3 weeks later. He's like, I just want you to know, I start my Monday morning listening to the West Village podcast every Monday morning. I was like, okay. So I'm super pumped about that. I don't know what that means for him. Praying for him. But Yeah, so like I think there's moments like for us to like demonstrate what a countercultural community looks like, where the world is like, we're isolated, we're lonely, we're broken, we're hurting, and the church can come alongside and say, so are we, but we have this that sustains us, and this is a picture of the beauty and goodness of Jesus. And then we get to say to people, and this is where I think the mission is like so right there in front of us. We get to say, would you like to come be a part of it?
Yes.
Would you like to come into that? We don't bite, right? We're not.
Which reminds me, I've got your post here that inspired this whole conversation. I just want to read it, and just kind of so that people understand why it's maybe inspiring to me. And then if you could just comment, especially on, there's an exhortation in this as well.
Right.
And so I want to get there. Obviously in a way that is sensitive to all the things and the pressures people are facing. Right. So I love your caveat at the very beginning, all caps, not a political post.
You gotta say that before you write anything.
Right. Yeah. Otherwise people are like, I'm done. Yeah. Either that or the thanks come out. So you said, I understand my brothers and sisters who long for churches to be able to gather again in the flesh, and who are frustrated by the moment we find ourselves in, lockdowns, etc. But there is something powerful, something deeply spiritual, deeply honoring to Jesus, and I believe demonstrates the power of the family of God, the church, when a group of people decide to be for one another, to reorient around one another, to pray for one another, to love and serve one another when it isn't easy, when it sucks, when it's not ideal, when it's on clunky Zoom and hard to have a conversation. In fact, and this really hit me. In fact, I think the hardness requires a deeper level of commitment, which makes it all the more beautiful. The 11 families in my CG, the church community group, have shared the hardness of this pandemic together, praying for each other, listening, serving each other and each other's neighbors. I honestly believe this is you at your best too, painting a vision. I love this. I honestly believe when we look back over our lives and remember COVID, these clunky Zoom calls will be precious to us. And they make Jesus and his church look beautiful. So if you're part of a church, lean in. Don't miss out on the beauty that Jesus has for his church in this difficult moment. And if you're lonely, reach out. We don't bite. There it is.
That's right.
I'm not convinced. I think you maybe do bite, but no, I'm
once in a while.
Okay. And we laugh a lot and would love to have you join us. Brilliant, Chris. But can you speak to that, especially the people who hear that and go, I get it, but I'm Zooming 5-6 hours a day. So how, I see people in this cycle where they're like desperately lonely, and I'm watching the light go out in their eyes. And yet they're too tired, or that's what they're saying. They're too exhausted to engage in community. So they're in this like doom loop in a way, right? And we find ourselves in this place. And I would say, for me, there hasn't been a single Zoom meeting with our life group where I wasn't too tired.
Sure. Yeah.
I started exhausted. I'm so glad I leaned in anyway. So it's not about that. But could you speak into this a little bit?
Yeah. Well, I think it comes down to really, and I don't mean to sound I'm saying this with like compassion, not with like a tone of judgment or condemnation, but like, what do we value? Because there's this inherent reality that like we become what we love. We become the things that we like pay attention to and give ourselves over to. And I am just so deeply concerned for my own soul. Like, I know how fragile it is. I know how weak I am, that if I don't have these rhythms in my life, that I know, even though they're hard, even though they might not be ideal, I know that they are going to produce something in me. For example, like nobody becomes spiritually mature or healthy by accident.
Yeah, you don't drift into that.
Right. It's like going to the gym. Like I go to the gym 4 days a week. I never wake up in the morning. I go, I get up at 5:30, but do my quiet time to go to the gym. The alarm never goes off at 5:30, and I'm like, woohoo, this is going to be so fun, right? And the whole time I'm driving, I'm like, this is stupid. I hate the gym. Why am I here? But I need that in order to maintain physical health. Well, the same thing is true of our hearts. Our hearts are prone to wander. we're prone to give ourselves to lesser things. And so these moments with our people, with our community group, and we have some real strategic and intentional rhythms that we have, those are there to keep my heart like focused, right? Keep my eyes fixed on Jesus. Even just the act of like going on there and clicking the launch button and the screen popping up and the little things, right? Like, in a sense, and I don't want to like oversell this, but I think at the depth of our being, this is true. It's a declarative act that says, I am for Jesus, right? It's like when my family sits down and makes time for Sunday morning gatherings, like to watch the gathering together. We put an online gathering out. It's like, regardless of whether we have like a profound spiritual experience like we would have had when there's a few hundred people in a room together, there's a declarative act in my home that says we value this. We agree with you, kids. This sucks, especially because you got to listen to your dad. This is horrible, but Jesus matters enough that we are going to do this, and it declares something to be true in our lives. And so I think like what I would say to people is that like, there is a powerful moment for you when you say yes to this, but that also then means, and this is the caution, it's a powerful moment when you say no, because when you say no, you're not just saying no, you're also saying yes to something else, right? You're saying yes to something else, and it may be something that appears to be as harmless as Netflix, but make no mistake about it, you're also in a sense saying no to Jesus. And that will over time form you in a particular way. And that's my like fear for people in this season. I sat with a dad here at the church office. He popped into the church office to drop something off, and I hadn't seen him in a while. Like, seen is a relative term, but like seen his name or his face popping up on anything. And I was just asking questions, how you doing? And they hadn't been pressing in with their community group. They hadn't really been pressing in online. And I just said, okay, like I understand it's hard, but I said, I just want you to ask the question. Like, let's assume that this goes for a year. What is the fruit of a year of not pressing in? And he has 2 young kids,
not unpacking the suitcase, right?
Right. You're just going to wait. You're going to wait. And it might actually be 2 years. What if it's 2 years? What do you think the fruit of 2 years of not having rhythms in your life that orient your heart around Jesus, his church, which I think is really important. Those 2 things go hand in hand, and his mission, which I think is also a part of that. What is that going to produce? What are you telling your kids you value? What are you telling your family you value? And he was just like, oh man, I needed to hear that. And now his family's like leaning in with me, leaning in, like participating in stuff and all the different things we have to help try and keep hearts attuned in this moment. And I think that's kind of what I'm getting after in that.
Well, that's awesome. And I mean, the second part of that phrase of the gathering together, not forsaking as some are in the habit of doing. I've often pointed out that, our reluctance to gather or to connect, once it becomes a habit, then it's something that has to break. It's not just right? Like you're putting yourself on a track that's taking you somewhere. Totally. And it's not where you want to go, right? And so I know you're tired. I know you're right, but this is, as you're talking, I think if you're on social, you're, 90% of what you're reading is focusing on what has been taken away. I wonder if our greatest danger as believers is what we're giving up. Like it's not the stuff that's taken. It's okay. So this is our lot. How do I be faithful to Jesus in this? Instead of just giving up and giving up, like, because I think our lives have shrunk in a way, right? Like certain spheres have just closed off to us. We're also allowing our lives to shrink further by not leaning in to community, right? And stepping out and checking on our neighbors and just living out the gospel, right? In a daily way.
That's good.
You've actually given me some good ideas for our Zoom group too, just in terms of connecting in different ways. I can say our Zoom group, our life group, has been the core of Manifest for us. Like it's just been, it's been indispensable. I think we overestimate our ability to withstand a storm out of community, right? Or underestimate how much we're formed by a lack of community, like you were saying. Like it's and we can't always see it until later, I feel a little bit like, when people see your kids and they haven't seen them in a while and they go, man, you've grown. Sometimes when I'm connecting with people now, I'm like, oh man, the light is going out in your eyes. Like, are you okay?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm just seeing that. So my heart is breaking. This is one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you about this, because I knew you have some incredible things to say. I love the wisdom that God's deposited in you, and it's coming from the trenches. It's coming from our heart for Jesus and people and his church. And so valuable, Chris. Is there anything else you just want to kind of close things off with? Just want to leave people with?
Yeah.
Maybe you've already said it. I don't know.
No, that's good. I think, like when we had our first, like when this all started, about a year ago, 11 months ago, and we had our first community group leaders meeting, which they're like the engine that drives our church. Like they're the hub of discipleship. And so we pull them together often. And so we pulled those leaders together for a Zoom call. We were doing it weekly actually at the beginning, just to check in and see how people were doing. And, I just sort of, I in a sense pleaded with them, like, let's not waste this.
Yeah.
Like, let's not waste this moment. And that would be, my encouragement to anyone who's watching this or listening. Like, don't waste. There's something that God has for us and for his church in this season, and it would be a shame. I think it would be to our shame to get to the end, whatever the end looks like. We don't even know what that looks like or when it's coming, and have missed out on an opportunity. And I think that's true of us as leaders of churches. There's ways to reimagine what it means to be the church going forward.
Yeah.
And there's some opportunities there. But I think for us as Christians as well, God is wanting to do something in our hearts and stir something in our affections. And I think there's an opportunity for us to come out on the other side. And I believe this for our church. I'm just believing this, that we're actually going to come out on the other side of this stronger, not weaker, closer, not further. More compelled by the beauty of Jesus and his church and the mission that he calls us to together than we were on the other side of it. And I've been saying the whole way through, not that I want the pandemic to continue going, not that I want there to be hurt and hardship, but I'm not eager for things to go back to the way that they were. It's not something that I'm longing for. I'm longing for a new future that looks different, both for me, for our people, but then also for our church family.
I'm with you on that one, brother. Thank you. Hey, thanks so much for taking the time.
Yeah.
You're infectious. And I'm so glad that I can expose our people to.
My wife says I'm annoying. I'll make sure
she's on the outer edges of infectious, trying to keep it somewhat contained, right?
Yeah.
Kelly's an awesome lady,
You got to throw that in there after I chuck her under the bus. Yeah.
You're in trouble. Anyway, hey, thanks again, Chris. Have a great day.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you.
Yep.
Oh,
wasn't that a great conversation? I knew you were going to love it because he's so challenging, but he's so winsome, and his love for Jesus and the gospel is just so solid. I actually walked out of that conversation myself going, man, it's good to be alive. I love Jesus. And so I hope that was challenging for you. And that it encouraged you to process how you're handling community even in this pandemic, because we have no choice. We're called together. This is part of what it means to follow Jesus. You're not really following Jesus fully if you're just doing it by yourself. And so let's lean into this season and figure out what it means, both to be an outpost where we are and how to do that together in various couplings and forms and gatherings and everything in between. So let's pray together. Jesus, thank you so much for today. Thank you that Chris was willing to sit down with me and chat about things that are dear and near to him. Thank you for the wisdom that you've imparted into him. I pray for West Village Church, Father, that you would pour out your Spirit on them in this season, that they would experience growth and depth and everything that you have for them. And I pray the same for us, Father. And Father, I know that there are people out there that are struggling with community right now. They're not knowing how to engage, or they just don't like Zoom, or they spend hours a day on it already. There's so many factors that are frustrating, but God, I pray that you show us how to be faithful and help us to stop making excuses and just lean into this thing that you're doing in this time. In Jesus' name, amen. Have an amazing day.